Well, look, I think it's important that we observe the same discretion that we have been observing until now in the context of these negotiations, for a simple reason. I think that going into the detail of what is happening in this negotiation will only guarantee that if the government of Gibraltar puts its view out of the actual state of play of the detail and explain some of the detail in the discussion, other parties will feel that they also have to give publicly their view as to how certain aspects of the negotiation are going on. And then we will end up having, instead of a discrete negotiation that we all hope will result in a final treaty to the benefit of many generations of the people of Gibraltar and the people around Gibraltar, we will end up with a public negotiation. And look, in my view, if you start to negotiate in public across the airwaves, you end up more often having a spat than you do having a meaningful opportunity to resolve an issue in dispute. And so therefore I think it's important that I communicate that the fact that the negotiations are ongoing is already a positive and good reason for optimism.
The head of the unit for the EU-UK trade cooperation at the EU said today that we are far from being able to say we've achieved our aim. That doesn't sound very encouraging, does it?
We've got to understand that this is, as I've said before, a really tall order, a really difficult attempt to ensure that we can deliver a very ambitious treaty on mobility based on the New Year's Eve framework agreement, which the United Kingdom, Spain and Gibraltar agreed, and which the government of Gibraltar and the government of the United Kingdom remain entirely committed to. That's the process. It won't be one that is resolved until all aspects of the treaty are agreed. And as I've said before, in the context of Gibraltar, it's not just a question of agreeing the principles, it's also a question of agreeing the wording, because the wording in relation to Gibraltar will also be heavily loaded for all sides looking at each and every single word in that treaty.
Well, can you tell us what are the main stumbling blocks? This official at the EU signalled today that it's the control and movement of people across the frontier that's the main issue.
Look, I don't want to make a comment on what are the issues which are the ones that we have resolved already, the ones that we think we will be able to resolve without much more negotiation, and the ones which are turning out to be the most difficult. But look, anybody who knows the history of the relationship between Gibraltar and Spain and the issues which have been in play whilst we were members of the European Union will understand that those are very likely the sorts of issues that are finally also turning out to be more difficult. I'm very clear about one thing. I think that the deal is a good thing for Gibraltar, of course, and that's my first area of concern because that's my responsibility. But I also think a deal would be very good for everyone in the Campo de Gibraltar and the whole of southern Andalusia. Indeed, I go further and I tell you, I think a deal would be good for the whole of the European Union because it's a demonstration that despite Brexit, the European Union and the United Kingdom can work together, can show that the European Union is a project that brings people together, that creates prosperity, and that's what I remain committed to. I mean, I voted Remain in the referendum, and I'm committed to the work of the government of Gibraltar being added value, work to deliver positive, optimistic, forward-looking approaches to every problem that comes our way. And I'm not going to rest until I know that I've done everything to ensure that we can deliver a treaty.
Chief Minister, you're giving very little away at the moment, but can you at least tell us whether the framework achieved in the New Year's Eve agreement remains the main goal?
So let's be very clear. The government of Gibraltar and the government of the United Kingdom have done the New Year's Eve agreement as the framework which would then be turned into a treaty in the negotiation between the United Kingdom and Gibraltar and the European Union. That is where we remain committed to going and what we remain committed to seeing become a reality, because that is where we launched all the boils of all the difficult issues that we and Spain might have had in a way that was announced by Spain to be a huge success, in particular by Foreign Minister Laya, and I announced in Gibraltar I also considered a huge success for Gibraltar, and at that time Dominic Raab, as Foreign Secretary, considered also a great success for the United Kingdom. Liz Truss has shown her commitment commitment to the New Year's Eve Framework Agreement, as well as has Boris Johnson in answers to questions in Parliament in the past. So I can only speak for the government of Gibraltar, but I can show you that the government of the United Kingdom has made that clear commitment. I remain fully committed, and my government remains fully committed to delivering a treaty based on the New Year's Eve Framework Agreement. And politics is a roller coaster, but I am confident that with hard work and with good faith, we can bring this process to a very successful and positive outcome for all of the people who live in and around Gibraltar.
Well, a goal was set to conclude negotiations by Easter. Does that remain a realistic prospect?
So Easter does remain a realistic prospect. Things can move very quickly, things can be slowed down whilst you analyse certain aspects of what it is that may be more difficult, whilst you do internal work to try and find ways through those aspects. Easter can be a realistic prospect still, and we still consider that that is where we should be aiming. But there are things which everybody in Gibraltar knows. I, in particular, my government in particular, the people who make up the cabinet of the Council of Ministers that I lead in particular, and the parties that I represent in particular, the Gibraltar Socialist Labour Party and the Liberal Party, will never concede in any circumstances.